Before I start talking about the times, I will just like a very brief feedback from our sisters and brothers regarding this exercises of mirroring each other's in the ablutions. Did anyone try it? Yeah, I presume you all have performed ablutions. Yeah. Anyone wants to give a little bit, just a very short comment, or did you experience anything, or notice anything, or?
You are more careful, as it always.
Okay, you're more careful. That's extremely good word, is careful, That's really what the word taqwa means, to be careful. So that's very good. That means you have more taqwa in a way. Yes, Peter?
Four people, we were four mirrors, and we went to the sea. It was very cold. It was for me, a very nice experience.
Okay.
It's the first time ever I do it with seawater.
Okay.
It might have been a bit rushed because it was not very warm in the water, but the feeling afterwards was much better than we had done.
So please carry on with this, during the whole weekend, and think about whether you do it in pairs or not, but think about your do and try sort of to get the awareness of what you're doing when you're doing it. The times of prayer, and maybe very briefly also including, I suppose, the space, the location of the prayer in the time-space continuum, or whatever you want to call it. The aspects of time and space are really difficult to separate from one another. You cannot really conceive of space isolated from time, or neither time isolated from space. And of course, the times of prayer are in some way also linked to place. For example, where you are, the times of prayer will be different depending on your location, the time of the year, etc. And also, of course, there is another geographical aspect to our prayer, and that is the command to face in a certain direction during the prayer. But let us start with the times. There are certain verses in the Quran which relate to the times of prayer. Instead of opening the Quran, I opened the prayer times application. Maybe it was what we call it, a so-called Freudian slip, I suppose. Okay, that was about... In Surah Hud, there is the command, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقم الصلاة طرفي النهار وزلفا من الليل إن الحسنات يذهبن السيئات ذلك ذكرى للذاكرين. And uphold the time prayer at both ends of the day and in the darkness of the night. Verily, the virtues extinguish or take away, good word, take away the vices. That is a reminder for those who take heed. طرفي النهار, there are many different explanations of this particular word, or these two words. Tarafay of the Nahar means the two ends of the day. According to the tafsir of Jalalain, which is very convenient because it happens to be in this app, but it's also the one we read when we studied tafsir and when I was studying the Alim course. So the two ends of the day is the morning prayer and the Dhuhr and Asr prayer. The morning prayer in the morning and the Dhuhr and Asr in the afternoon. And Zulaf is the plural of Zalfa or Zulfa, which means a part, and some parts of the night, meaning the Maghrib and the Isha. But there are different ways of understanding this. It doesn't really matter how you interpret this, but it is basically the command of establishing the prayer at certain times of day and night. And then a little bit of a reminder that what is the purpose of this? Yes, that the virtues, they take away. Yudhibna, they take away the vices. Again, a hint towards the transformative nature of the prayer. In another one, we have, so establish prayer at the descent or to, for, or in conjunction with the descent of the sun towards the darkness of the night and the recitation of Fajr. Verily the recitation of Fajr is witnessed. Duluki Shams, the descent of the sun, is this basically what we are experiencing now. The time of the descent of the sun. In the morning, the sun ascends, of course, and rises till it reaches a certain point where it will rise no more, and then it will slowly start to descend. And there is a time in the middle when the sun is at its highest point. It doesn't have to be zenith, because the sun is not right above the head on this far north, or the what are they called now? What's the English term for vändekrets? Kräftans vändekrets och stenbockens vändekrets. Do you know them? No? If you look at a globe or a world map, you will have the equator, of course. You'll have the polar circle maybe right up somewhere very far up towards the poles. But there will also be another line around, one above the equator and one below the equator. One to the north of the equator and one to the south of the equator. Above and below is only because we are used to looking at the map in a certain direction, with the north up and the south down, which is, it doesn't have to be that way. Anyway, so that is a point. One has got the name from Capricorn, from the constellation of Capricorn. The other one from Cancer. I can't remember what they're called. Does anyone not remember the names of these two things?
The Tropic of Cancer.
The Tropic. Someone knows this, yes. The Tropic of the Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. I think it's Capricorn, no? Or is it Sagittarius? Capricorn. Sagittarius is Skytten, no? Capricorn is Stenbocken, yeah. So that is the point beyond which, between these two, and including the equator, between these points, at some part of the year, the sun will be directly above the head, vertical. That's where it will reach zenith. But north or south of these, it will never do it, not even in the middle of summer. And we are far, far, far beyond the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, one on the southern and one on the northern hemisphere. So, but it will obviously still reach a highest point. And that highest point is called istiwa, when it's level, the balance, you can call it. And when the sun leaves that point, it's only an instant. But it is considered in traditional Islamic sort of knowledge or fiqh to be a time of 10, 15 minutes or so, maybe. And that is because the timings of the prayers are not based necessarily on the exact position of the sun. They are based on the position of the sun, but not necessarily on the exact position of the sun, but on the perceived position of the sun, what we can see. These are the signs of the heavens and the earth that we can see with our eyes. Islam is the religion of simplicity. Everyone should have access to all the information you need to be able to practice it. Hence, the indicators for the different timings of the prayer are things which are there for everyone to see. With a very basic knowledge, you can learn it yourself without having access to any timekeeping devices or any timetables or any computer software or hardware or anything really. You don't have to have an iPhone to be able to suss out the times of the prayer. Because what is the traditional way for the time of Dhuhr? You put a stick into the ground. I was hoping to be able to do this, but it's not sunny enough, so we can't do it here. There's no shadow. You put a stick into the ground, and then you watch the shadow. You don't sit and watch it. Or you can do, but that would be very tedious. But you mark it every interval of whatever you feel is reasonable, 5 minutes or so. And of course, that shadow will slowly decrease as the sun is ascending in the sky. And then it will it will also move, it will sort of turn, but the length of it will also change. So it will create a sort of a semicircle, I suppose, in the end, or like a parabolic curve in a way. But anyway, it will reach a point where it doesn't go any shorter. And then slowly it will start to become longer again. Now that point, when it is noticeably, when the shadow of a stick that you've put into the ground is noticeably longer than it was before, that's the time when Dhuhr time starts. So it is obviously a few minutes after this point of balance, because you cannot notice the increase or the increase in length, straight away. It will take a few minutes. So say 5-10 minutes, something. Now that's technically the time for beginning. Because it's a fuzzy thing, some place you might notice it earlier, depends on how good the stick is, depends on how smooth the ground is, depends on how good you are at measuring, depends on how often you're measuring all these things. If you had a very sophisticated measuring equipment, you could measure it straight away, instantly. It become a micrometer longer than it was before. So again, it is a fuzzy thing. It is not exact science, and that's the whole issue of the timings of the prayer, is an approximative science. It is not absolute, and that is very well and good for us to understand. There are approximations. There is no exact. So these prayer time sheets that we have are really, they are a little bit misleading in a way, because it is not so exact. There is roughly about something in the region of. So at a certain time anyway, now the shadow starts to grow, and then it grows and it grows and it grows, and there come a time when the shadow is twice as long as it was when it was at its shortest. Or rather, not correct. If you look at the shadow of this stick when it is the shortest it is, and you sort of remember that length, that amount of centimeters, and then you wait till the shadow of the stick is as long as the stick itself, minus the bit that it already had when it was at its shortest. So say you put a stick now and you're looking, and the shortest it gets is 50 centimeters. The stick is 1 meter long, and the shortest the shadow gets is 50 centimeters. Yeah. It doesn't get any shorter. Then it starts growing again. That's what the time when Thor started. Now you look at the shadow, and when it becomes 1 meter, the same length as the stick, plus the length it had when it was at its highest point, which was 50 centimeters in this case. It's probably actually even more today. That is the time when Asr starts. According to all the schools of practice, except for one view within the Hanafi madhab, which is when it becomes twice as long plus the original shadow, so 2.5 meters, which will be between half an hour and 1 hour later. It's not such an amazing big difference between these two times. And then the time of Asr will remain, well, till Maghrib really. But there are different views on how long before Maghrib you have to say your Asr prayer. There's some different schools will have a different idea of, there is one time which is the ideal time, one time which is the time of necessity, which usually lasts the whole way. In the Jafari madhab, it is that the time, first 5 minutes of the time after the shadow will start becoming longer. It's exclusive for Dhuhr, and then the time is shared, or it's for both Dhuhr and Asr until as 5 minutes remain before sunset. Basically, when there's only time to do one prayer. So basically, you can join the prayers throughout the whole of this period, because those 5 minutes, it's not 5 minutes, it's as long as it takes to say the prayer, but let us say, for example, 5 minutes. That's one view. In the Maliki madhab, there is a time of fadila, with the virtuous time, and there's a time of darura, which is ras the whole way. So Dhuhr you can pray right up on the tight sunset, even in the Maliki madhab, for example. And this is completely aside from the issue of joining prayers when you're a traveler, etc. So there is a lot of scope, there is a lot of flexibility within this. And in the Hanafi madhab, because of these two conflicting views within the Hanafi madhab, some scholars hold the view that this time between the two Hanafi times, between the shadow being as long as the stick and the shadow being twice as long as the stick, it's a mutual time, which you can pray both Dhuhr and Asr in that time. No. So there is always a lot of scope, there is always a lot of flexibility. So it's not as rigid as you might be misled to think. So yes, be aware of the time. By all means, use a timetable or an app or whatever you have, an Asr watch or whatever it may be. But don't be too rigid about this sort of exact minutes, I would say. Feel the flexibility. And the more we get this ability to relate to what's happening in the what shall I say, in the sky, let's put it that way, at the particular time, the more natural it will feel for us as well to relate to the time of prayer. To look at the timetable and look at a watch and to be sort of guided by that, and then only to find out that you've forgotten to change your watch because of the change from summertime to wintertime or the other way around, is going to be very frustrating. And it is, again, it is something which has the same effect of us as the rest of this sort of very boxed in life that we have now, in this time. So to break free from that and to be able to directly access it from the sort of heavenly signs, or the position of the sun, or however we sort of see it on the sky, then maybe it will do us good spiritually as well. Anyway, then when the sun sets, and when the whole of the sun has disappeared beyond the horizon, and it is important now to think the horizon, not when it's disappeared behind a mountain or a building or some trees. It is the horizon, and if you can't see the horizon, it is when it would have disappeared beyond the horizon, if you could have seen the horizon. So you have to imagine the horizon. Or, alternatively, depending on where you are, when you can no longer see the reflection of the sun or the light of the sun directly shining on any object like a building or a mountain or something which you can see. I spent my first Ramadan, because the time of breaking of the fast is the same time of the time for Maghrib prayer. I spent my first Ramadan in Chitral in northern Pakistan, and visible from that little town, a beautiful little town, certainly was at that time, with a fantastic mosque, like a fortress on the bank of a very fast-flowing river. And to this date, some of the most wonderful Taraweeh prayers I've experienced. The mountain, which is one of the tallest mountains of Pakistan, and I think the tallest mountain which is not part of the Himalayan massive, Tiricmir. It is like a lone mountain, but it is still something like over 7,000 meters tall. It's a very tall mountain, and it's sort of on its own. So you can see it very clearly. And of course, because the higher you are, the sort of further away the horizon will be. You see what I mean? So even though it was almost dark in the village, you could still see the sun shining on the snow-clad top of this mountain of Tiricmir. And only when you could no longer see the light would sort of go and up and up and up, and suddenly would leave the tip of the mountain, this orangey glow, of almost pinkish or towards the end. And when it would leave, that's when the signal would go for the breaking of the fast. In Chitral, they would fire a gun, like a salute. You would hear the boom, and then it's time for breaking the fast. They could have done the adhan, I don't know. But they did the adhan as well, of course, but they had this gunfire. So it was maybe it was 1 hour later than it would have been had that big mountain not been there. So it was a very big effect of that. So, but you will feel it, you will see it, you will feel I think you will normally be aware of the sort of science. And again, it is not such an exact science. It is when you are aware of it and when you feel, in your heart, you feel certain that the time has come. It is even actually written in the books we studied in the Alim course that the condition for the prayer being valid is both that the time should have started and that you should be convinced that the time had started. So if you just guess, but no, I don't think so, but I'll pray anyway, and then you find out, it had started, according to that, what was written in the book, it will not be valid because you were not convinced. So it is when you feel it now at this time. It doesn't mean you have to be convinced in a way that if you are if you are a person who always has this thoughts of, if you're very insecure, in your nature, then of course you will never be convinced. So you will never have to. You will never get to say the prayer. But I don't mean like that. But basically, you should feel quite comfortable. Yeah, at the time, just so you see the sun setting, and you can see the horizon of the sea, then the sun has set. That's fine. Or you will feel the sort of the whole. And that's the other thing. What does it feel like? What if the sun is not there? What if it's cloudy? Well, if you are used to observing the atmosphere, the nature around you at these times, you will know what it feels like when the sun sets. So even if you can't see the sun setting, you will still be aware of now the sun has set, because I just know. So again, this is a thing of continuously being aware of and experiencing these timings. And then the most contested of them all, the time of Isha, it will start, when will it start? Oh, God knows. 5 minutes after Maghrib, or when you can see the stars, or when the red light disappears, or when the white light disappears at the horizon, or at a certain amount of minutes or hours after the time of sunset. There are so many suggestions of this, there are so many rulings on this that it's almost impossible to say that this is the time of Isha. Again, I think it only shows the inexact nature of this science, and the flexibility and scope which is existing there. So I would say it's not such a big deal. The Isha time is when it's dark. When is it dark? Well, whatever you feel like is dark, is dark. Yeah. So I think there is a lot of scope for that. Anyway, then it is recommended to say your Isha prayer before midnight. The Prophet himself had said, وَلَوْلَا أَنْ أَشُقَّ عَلَى أُمَّتِي لَأَخَرْتُ الْعِشَاءَ إِلَى ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ. If I would not fear that it would be a hardship for my followers, I would have delayed the time of Isha until a third of the night. But now he did fear the hardship, so he didn't. So we should take that ease. We do not have to wait to a third thinking, well, the Prophet said he would have. Yes, he said he would have, but he didn't. So that's also important. He is showing an expression, and he's showing an urge and a wish and what he would have wanted to do. And again, you're thinking of a time and a culture where a third of the night might have been very, very suitable. Because that will mean that after Isha, you can withdraw. No interaction, no dealings. Preferably, no talking after the Isha prayer. Or certainly no unnecessary talking. So hence to delay it a bit so that will be the sort of close of the day. That will mark another stage then in which you enter in your day and you come into next. But there is the scope. By all means, join it with Maghrib or pray it after an hour or an hour and a half or whatever is suitable in your lifestyle, in your situation, in your position. We sometimes prefer to pray the Maghrib prayer a little bit late and then sit and do dhikr or something and then pray Isha when the prayer time falls in, according to the earliest of all the different timetables, because then you have a whole package. So it's all up to you, really. You can do this in any way, whichever way suits you. I think it's a personal preference. You cannot rule and say this is how you should do it or this is how you have to do it. You can also pray the Isha after midnight, but it's not recommended. But the time, strictly speaking, according to, for example, the Hanafi madhab, lasts up until the spread of the first light of dawn at the horizon again. Again, a contested thing, but nowhere near as much contested as the timing of Isha. And then the time for Fajr lasts until sunrise. Today we prayed Fajr quite early. There was over an hour left until sunrise. So we could feel quite a difference when we came for Fajr and a difference when we went out after dhikr, which was still, strictly speaking, in the Fajr time. And again, there are different preferences. According to some schools, according to some traditions, you should pray it as late as you can, almost just before sunrise, so it's bright almost outside. Asfiru bil fajr fahinnahu a'zamu lil ajr. I think they claim hadith which has no takhrij, but anyway. Or you should pray it in the beginning of the time, which is earlier. So again, I think it's really up to you what is more suitable in your life. How does it work for you? What works best for you, combining with your daily routines and according to your personal preference. I think, again, it is very much of an open thing. And the Quran of Fajr is mashhood. There are certain times, of course, of the day which are special. All times of the day are special, but in different ways. And the time of Fajr, according to this verse of the Quran, is mashhood. تشهده الملائكة ملائكة الليل وملائكة النهار. Because at that time, if you recite Quran at the time of Fajr, around the Fajr prayer, between those timings of the Fajr prayer. It is witnessed of the angels who are on the day shift, who have just come to start their shift, and it's witnessed by those who are on the night shift, who are just about to leave. So that all of the angels will witness. This is the classical interpretation. Anyway, it is witness. It's reading, reciting the Quran in the prayer and outside of the prayer at Fajr time is different to doing it at any other times. In the same way as doing dhikr and tasbih at the time just before the setting of the sun is also different than doing it at other times. It's a special time, as we will get from the next verse. Here it is one, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, فاصبر على ما يقولون وسبح بحمد ربك قبل طلوع الشمس وقبل غروبها ومن آناء الليل فسبح وأطراف النهار لعلك ترضى. That so patiently bear what they are saying. Let the dogs bark, as they say. And praise and glorify your Lord before the rising of the sun and after the setting of it, and during some times of the night. Praise Him, and at the two ends of the day, that you may be pleased. Allah is telling His Prophet ﷺ to praise Him and to do tasbih and tahmeed, sabbih bihamdi rabbika, to sing the glory and praise of your Lord at all these different times, before the setting of the sun and before the rising of the sun. The Fajr time and the time before Maghrib. And at some instances or some times of the night, some part of the night, or part of the time of the night, not the whole night, part of the night, and at the two ends of the day. Some scholars, rather a lot of them, of the Mufassirun, of the people who interpret the Quran, will say that these are for the prayer times. So before the rising of the sun will be Salatul Fajr, before the setting of the sun will be Salatul Asr, at the times of the night will be the Maghrib and Isha, the two ends of the day, and then they sort of contrive this in some way as well. I think really it could very well include the Salat, the prayer, but I would not say it is exclusive for the prayer, and that is mainly because of another verse. Which I thought I had here. No, almost the same. فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ قَبْلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ وَقَبْلَ الْغُرُوبِ. Again, patiently bear what they are saying, and praise and glorify your Lord before the rising of the sun and before the sunset. But there is another verse which I had here. Bismillah. Okay, I don't find it, but anyway, it is also that you should praise Allah after the sujood. Wa adbara sujood. Let me just find it for you. For me. Yeah. It was the one. I was just didn't see the whole ayah. So patiently bear what they are saying and praise and glorify your Lord before the rising of the sun and before the sunset. وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَسَبِّحْهُ وَأَدْبَارَ السُّجُودِ, and part of the night praise Him, and after the sujood, after your salawat, after your prayers. So hence, if it would mean saying the salat, it would mean that you should say the salat after the salat. Hence I say it means doing dhikr, other types than the salat. So this has regard to the times of prayer. The timings of the prayer, again, with all the different schools, with all the different things, I think for us is what I want us to do more in a practical way, is again that we should try to be aware of this. We should try to have a feel of this. And what are the effects of these times? What is so special about this Fajr? What can you feel it? Can you get it sort of, okay, now I'm saying Fajr prayer. In the time of Fajr, it has this. There is, for example, an hadith, which I will try to find. I haven't looked it up. It just came to me now, which gives you different virtues for the different prayers, the different aspects of your life, which will be affected by this particular different salats. I will try and find it before and go and narrate it from memory. But there is also a thing about the space and the direction of the prayer. And there I had this of many verses. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة. والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. That virtue is not that you should turn your faces towards the west or towards the east, or rather towards the east or towards the west. And neither is virtue, or rather virtue is that you believe in Allah, or you have faith in Allah, and the day, and the last day, and the angels, and the book, and the prophets, and that you give your wealth, or of your wealth, in spite of your love for it, to your relatives, to the orphans, to the poor, to the wayfarer, to the beggars, to the prisoners, and that you establish prayer and give the poor due, and those who fulfill their undertakings when they have undertaken something, and those who patiently bear trials and hardship, and who are patient even at the time of war. Those are the truthful. أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون, and those are the people of taqwa, those are the careful people. But in the same surah, فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ comes the verse that you should turn your faces towards the holy mosque, towards the Kaaba in Mecca. So in one hand, Allah is saying in the same surah that virtue is not to turn your face towards the east or towards the west. At the same time, He's also commanding us to turn our faces towards the Holy Kaaba. So how do we understand this? Is it or is it not important to face in a particular direction during our prayer? Now, one interpretation, which I am not too fond of, is that you don't turn towards the east or towards the west, i.e. you do not turn towards Jerusalem or Rome or any other particular place, but you turn towards the Kaaba only. And hence, but what if you happen to be to the east of the Kaaba then? In India, Qibla is due west. And in North Africa, for example, Qibla is due east. So is it not then virtuous to face east or west? So I think it is more, what this ayat is telling us is, again, not to be too obsessive about the form. You have to say the prayer, okay, this particular clock, 12:14, and not 12:15. Or you have to face 159.7 degrees and not 159.8 degrees, or whatever it may be. Don't obsess too much. There is a form, there is a structure, it has a purpose. Let it fulfill its purpose, but do not exaggerate it beyond its purpose. The purpose of the form is to be a vehicle for the meaning. If the form is not the vehicle for the meaning, the form has not really, maybe it has some value, but it is not complete in itself. It is not. You cannot only have the form and think that it will do what you want it to do without having the meaning in there. So what Allah is saying here, turning towards the east and the west, yes, in your case then toward the southeast from Sweden, wherever you are, turning towards the Kaaba, that is not the complete virtue. Virtue also includes all these other things. To be generous, to be helpful, to perform your duties, that you have faith in Allah, that you have faith in the angels and the books and the prophets. And then you face towards the Kaaba and fill your salat with all this meaning. And it is not the Kaaba itself that is the object of worship. It is the meaning of the Kaaba. We only worship Allah. Allah has commanded us through His Prophet ﷺ and in His Quran to face towards the Kaaba when we pray, but our prayers are never directed towards the Kaaba. So it is, again, do not become worshippers of the religion. That is also a kind of shirk. You worship only Allah. You do not worship the deen. You worship Allah according to the deen, or through the deen, but the deen is not your object of worship. And so hence, again, the Kaaba is not your object of worship. The form is not your object of worship. The times are not your object of worship. You are so obsessed by the sun that it's almost become as if you're worshipping the sun. You are worshipping Allah. And Allah is everywhere. And Allah is at all times. So, yes, have respect and regard for, learn and practice the form, but don't get stuck in the form. Let it be the vessel for the meaning. You cannot have the meaning without the form, but the form without the meaning is just an empty shell. So we have to also fill it with meaning. And hence, these prayer times, yes, it's good to know, yes, it's good to understand the technicalities behind it. It's good to be able to put this stick in the ground and calculate your prayer times, according to that stick. But it is also good to feel what it signifies. Why do we pray at these times? Why do we pray the Fajr prayer at Fajr? Why are these all things? To have an understanding of this, to feel this really when we do it. So we have this content in our prayer. We face towards the Kaaba. What does it mean? I have heard, not in quoting of the Prophet ﷺ, but as a recommendation, as a general recommendation, and as a practice of pious people, that you should visualize the Kaaba in front of you when you perform your prayers. You should sort of think that. I even heard, I can't remember who it was now, but it was a person who, I cannot remember exactly the circumstance, but something that the person was challenged for, why it took so long for each prayer or before it started the prayer. And then he said, it took me an extra long time today to visualize the Kaaba, and I couldn't start the prayer until I saw it in front of me. So, okay. So that is, So I don't think we have to. It's not a requirement. It's not a command. It's not a ruling that we should visualize the Kaaba in front of us. But we should have the awareness that yes, I'm facing the Kaaba. I'm directing my prayer to Allah, who is everywhere and nowhere, who is beyond space and time. But I am praying in time and I am praying in space, and hence I am directing myself, towards this direction of the Holy Kaaba. And in that way you can visualize the Kaaba. You visualize what you do. Again, it is a requirement that you know which way you're facing. If you are in some place and you have no idea which way to face, which way is Qibla, as far as I have learned, there may be other rulings in other schools, I don't know. But you have to make a qualified guess. If there is, maybe you can see from the sun, it's good again to learn to work out the direction of Qibla from the sun. How can I see, just from looking at the sun or the shadow of the sun, which way I should pray? That should really be sort of basic requirement for a Muslim. Really, we should learn this much, and it's not that complicated. It's a little bit of astronomy or a little bit of geometry, or what you want to call it. Or the easy way is to think that the way the sun is about 11 o'clock. That is the direction of Qibla. So, or say 10 o'clock now in winter time then, and 11 o'clock in the summer. The way the sun shines from at that time, that is more or less Qibla. In some prayer time apps and other computer programs, they even give actually a time of Qibla. And the time of Qibla, what they mean is what time is the sun shining directly from the Qibla. So if you ever could be confused about what the time of Qibla is, that is the thing. And it is usually sometime around 11 o'clock, or just before 11 here. So in different parts of the world it will be completely different times, of course. But the sun is, if you are in the northern hemisphere, and I was so confused when we were in South Africa, and even before that once when I visited Malaysia, which is also on the other side of the equator, it just felt wrong. I couldn't work out the direction of Qibla, and I realized it's because I'm on the southern hemisphere, and the sun is in the north, and it doesn't go the way I'm used to. It still goes from the east to the west, but the east to the west is different here because I'm on the other side. I'm looking at the same phenomenon from another direction. It was really it took some time to get my head around it. But here anyway, so the sun around noontime is usually more or less towards the south. And that is our guide, So the sun is towards the south. So when you're going to pray Zohar prayer, now the sun has already been at its highest point, because that's the whole idea that Zohar is started. So the sun is now going towards the west, isn't it? Yeah. So when you say Dhuhr prayer, you usually say it after the time has begun. It's a little bit after the time has begun. And you should be facing a little bit to the east of the south. That means that you will imagine that you have the sun coming from your front right-hand side, you know. It's to sort of be shining on your right ear, if you see what I mean, you know. So when I pray Dhuhr, the sun should be sort of there from me, from where I am facing this way, the sun should be from that side when I'm praying Dhuhr. You know. When I'm praying Asr, I should more or less have the sun coming from my right. Yeah, because now it depends a little bit different, of course, depending on summer and winter, but more or less, because now later on in the afternoon, it's maybe getting on for the time when the sun is in the west, or the sun is not yet in west because it's still a little bit to the south, because I'm praying Asr, especially now in the winter, I'm praying it quite early. But even sort of most time of the year, you may be praying at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and that time, because of summertime, is more or less the sun coming from your right. And then at Maghrib, you should have the sun coming from your sort of over your right shoulder. You know, or the sunset, more or less, coming over your right shoulder. At Isha, you won't see the sun anyway, so it's not going to help you. So that's sort of just a little bit of a sort of idea, you know. And at Fajr, again, you won't see the sun as well. But if you did, or when you see the sun rising, it should be rising from your sort of little bit front, but from your left-hand side. So here, sun should rise there. Come over there, and there we go Dhuhr time. Here we go Asr time, and here somewhere behind my back, on my over my right shoulder, it will set at the Maghrib time. So these things, if we are aware of them, it will also make sometimes our life easier and in a way more natural. Maybe we'll develop the feeling that we will know that the time of the prayer has come in without really knowing how we know it. It will be almost like a second nature. Just, all right, it's time for Dhuhr. You can double check by your watch or clock or just stick in the ground or whatever it is. But I think you will develop that. And also maybe you will develop a feeling for Qibla, so you will know. I remember, and I have to really say I have lost this sort of immediacy of it. I had it at one time in my youth when I was doing it. An epic journey together with Ahmed Zaytouni and in Morocco. And he would always ask me to do the adhan. And I would just go and I would sort of call the adhan, and I wouldn't really think about the direction, and it would almost always be in Qibla. Because you sort of got the feel for it somehow, that this is going to be the direction. And I think that was because we lived so near. We were traveling, we were like living so near these signs, we would always look at the sky and look at this. We didn't really have a compass or anything like that. You know, so you can develop these abilities, I'm certain, and you can sort of, in my case, then maybe redevelop it, you know, or refresh it as well. I think that will be enough for now. We have a little time. No, we don't. It's time for Asr. Let me double check then. Look at that. Just now on the app, it says 13:27. Right. Alhamdulillah. So you can probably develop it. Anyway, so the shadow of the sun is as long as the stick, and plus the little bit of the shadow the stick had at the time of Dhuhr, you know. Yeah. So we assume that we saw that, and we know now it's Asr time. So I will ask Brother Abdul Hadi to call the adhan, and we'll pray Asr inshallah straight away after the adhan, and then we'll have a little bit of a break before Sister Yaqut has her talk.